Today's guest is David Peris. In a 20-plus year career, David was one of the first members of the Sony Music online department, helping to create the first websites for Bob Dylan, Beyonce, Bruce Springsteen, Michael Jackson, Jeff Buckley, and hundreds of other artists. An Austin resident, he has maintained a thriving independent consultancy for the last decade plus, working closely with Roger Waters throughout the record-breaking tour of The Wall and the current This Is Not a Drill tour. Tori Amos, Elton John, Sheryl Crow, Thievery Corporation, The Beatles, Paul McCartney, Paris and Ringo Starr, The Beach Boys, Def Leppard, Guns N' Roses, U2, RIAA, and many other artists and organizations. David has a degree in computer science from NYU and is known as a digital plumber.
Welcome to Simply Walk the Talk. Our bodies and minds adapt to what we do most of the time. If you want to change your body and mind, you must change what it is you do most of the time. This podcast explores all things health, wellness, fitness, lifestyle, and biohacking. Stay tuned as we explore various thoughts, methods, and experiences from a multitude of conversations between our interesting guests and experts through many fields of work. Sit back, relax, and enjoy the show.
Simply walk the talk. Simply walk the talk.
Mr. David Peris, welcome to the show, my friend.
Thank you so much, Josh. It's a pleasure to be here.
This has been in the works, I think, for a long time. And I must start out by saying, for those that are listening and watching, David and I are colleagues. We actually work together, and we met through the Roger Waters first tour, at least my first tour with Roger Waters, which is called, what was that one? Us and Them, right?
Right. Yep.
Yeah. So that was Us and Them. And that's when I first met you. And I was always kind of like, I kind of found myself being like, so what does this dude do? Like, who is this guy?
You're not the first.
Yeah, right. And that obviously prompted me to want to bring you onto the show. And now that I'm at a point on this platform, I wanted to bring out more content that is outside of just fitness or health and wellness. And obviously there are going to be some things that do cross over in health and wellness, but I wanted to start out by letting people know that we've actually worked together quite a bit. And you, in fact, helped me to boost my own personal website back in the day. And when I found out that you do websites for Roger and many other people, I was like, I don't know if I can afford this guy. But lo and behold, we ended up working together, and you helped my online presence grow tremendously. So I have to thank you for that. And this is why I have you on the show. So let's start with that. Let's start with your background. Obviously, I went over all of the things in the intro, but let's talk about kind of how you got to where you are today.
Sure. Well, thank you, Josh. I also want to add one more thing that I remember I helped you do, which is the most important thing that I think any human can be these days. Verified on Instagram, if you remember that.
If I remember that, bro, of course I remember that. Yes. And that was really huge because it was at a time in my career where I was like, I work with a number of artists, high profile, clients, and I saw some other people that had verified accounts, and I'm like, man, I don't know how this works. And I don't even know how it even came about, but you one day were like, hey, I might be able to help you out with that if you even care. I was like, of course I care. And you helped me out through that. And then I know after I got my account verified, thanks to you, I ended up talking to a few other people, letting them know that, like, hey, if you do care about it and it means something to you and your brand, this is the guy to talk to. So right. Yeah. So thanks for that.
Sure. It's a different time now. Now, as people know, you can now buy the verification. But back when we started, it really was the holy grail of, oh my God, I am a somebody. So yeah, just rewinding a couple years back. But yeah, you're very welcome for that. In terms of your question though, and how I got started, it's an interesting story. I grew up, in South Texas. I was always a computer guy. My dad got me a Apple IIc computer from the Dillard's department store. I remember on a stormy Sunday. I actually have it behind me. I have that old Apple computer. Um, and my life was forever changed. I mean, I was just sucked into that thing and, programming and games and the whole thing. And it just captured my imagination in the way that a lot of kids are captured by Star Wars or sports or whatever. But just the computer was it. And I knew that was my gateway to life and a career and everything. I just knew back in the sixth grade that this was the thing for me. I just fell in love with it, and I couldn't get enough. And I would stay up all night, and I had many businesses and in school where I was printing posters and things for people because I had a printer, which was a very big deal back then. And yeah, it was crazy. So anyway, I was the definitely the school computer nerd.
Did you?
So anyway, I went
And
to college in New York City. Went to NYU, studied computer science, obviously, duh. And I loved New York City. I loved the school and everything else. And around 1995, I actually had a job working in the computer lab, and this was back in the primitive days of the internet and browsing the web. And I had Netscape Navigator up, if anybody remembers that. And I was looking at websites that would, just basically load for me. And one of them was the Sony website. So I was on the Sony website looking at TVs or whatever, and then I clicked over their music division, and there was a little ad on the corner that said, we're looking for a webmaster. I didn't even know what that meant, but I thought maybe I could get free CDs, from this company. Oh my God, that'd be so exciting, because they were like $19 each at Tower Records near school, and I was just like, oh my God, I gotta save some money. So anyway, I sent in, resume, cover letter, and got a call a couple days later saying, hey, come in for an interview. So I did, and I sat down at 55th and Madison, the big Sony building, which is now apartments, I believe, but back in the day was a big monster building. And they said, yeah, you're great. How would you do this job? You're still in college. And I said, I don't know, maybe I could be like an intern or consultant or something. And they said, okay, we'll give you $10 an hour, and we want to make we want you to make official websites for our artists. And I thought, oh, okay, great. So my classic story is like half my notebook was like calculus or whatever from college, but the other half was meet with Ozzy Osbourne at 4 p.m. and sit down with Mariah Carey and Michael Jackson and Ricky Martin. And I mean, it was crazy. And these were the real people. It wasn't like, back in the day, there was this thing, Madame Tussauds Wax Museum, where it was like the fake,
Right.
thing. But like these were the actual people. I would literally sit down with Mariah Carey, and it was, as somebody who was a music fan and a computer guy, I mean, it was just the hybrid of my two passions coming together so beautifully. I mean, I could not have orchestrated this in any way. I mean, it was ridiculous. And I was getting paid. I mean, a little bit, I guess. But it was just ridiculous. And I did end up getting those free CDs, and my life was forever changed based on that experience. And it's still kind of sends the trajectory of my life going in that direction of music and tech. And then in 1989, that's when our worlds kind of collided, because I got a fax from a guy named Mark Fennick, who Josh probably knows extremely well, a mutual friend of ours,
Yeah.
And the manager of Roger Waters. And he sent a fax into my department at Sony saying, Roger is planning on touring this year in 1999, and he would like an internet website set up to help promote the tour. And my heart was just racing, because Roger Waters was kind of in a quiet period before that. He had released a record in the early 90s called Muse to Death. And then he was kind of quiet in the 90s because he was working on an opera. And then, yeah, all of a sudden he had this tour kind of pop up. And I was like, yes, 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 can I do it? And my boss was like, yeah, you're the biggest Roger Waters fan I know. You run with the ball. And I did. And it was exciting. I got his domain name. I remember trying to match his handwriting in this font, and I put up this website saying, it just said Roger Waters and something like he might tour in 1999 ? And that was his whole website because that's all the content I had. And Rolling Stone, the magazine, picked up on this fact that Roger Waters now had a website and he might tour. And I was like, oh my God, like when I was a kid, I never really thought all this would be possible. I mean, forget Roger for a second, but Rolling Stone was my Bible. You know,
Right.
some kids had like Sports Illustrated and Playboy and all these things under their bed. I had Rolling Stone that I would go and get at the mall at Walden Books, if anyone remembers that bookstore. And yeah, I would just collect these things like they were some sort of holy grail. I would read them in the library. Yeah, it was just mind blowing. Like something I did ended up in the Bible, pretty
Right.
much for me.
Right.
And then I ended up working for Jan Wenner, but that's maybe we'll talk about that later. But so yeah, that's kind of how I got to that point of this job, Sony, Roger, and then yeah, the plot thickens from there, man. There's a lot more after that.
Wow.
Yeah.
Oh, there's certainly a lot within that, and I it's interesting when you talk about getting a fax from Mark Finnick.
Yeah.
I never forget the first time that I had like my official welcoming to the tour.
Mhm.
I got an email from Mark Finnick, and the subject line of the email was "Welcome to the machine."
Oh,
And oh my goodness, like I even have chills just saying that right now
sure.
because that was so powerful. Now keep in mind, I'm almost the opposite of you in that when I first met Roger, I didn't know who Roger Waters was.
Okay.
And people would, I mean, I'm 42 years old now, but I grew up in Oklahoma, sort of right smack dab in the middle of the United States. And I was caught up in between East Coast to West Coast rap and hip hop and R&B. But I also was a big fan of like the South, you know, like music coming out of the South. And for me, it was all about hip hop and R&B. And you know, when people eventually mentioned, "Oh, well, Roger Waters is Pink Floyd," I'm like, "Yeah, I've heard of Pink Floyd, but I don't know who Pink Floyd is." And
Yeah.
I never forget when Roger was actually in the gym the first time that I met him. One of the songs came on. I think it was I know a Brick 2 I think came on,
Yeah.
and they were like, "That's Pink Floyd. That's Roger Waters." I was like, "Oh, okay, cool." You know, and then you know now I know a big bulk of the music. In fact, I
Sure.
have that album that you were talking about, "Amused to Death,"
Yeah.
and you know, and the rest is history, right? Like it's once you work with him, you kind of get an understanding as to why he has so much longevity in the career that he does because of the type of person that he is. And I'm sure we'll get into this at some point too, but it's really interesting being on the inside, knowing that a lot of the stuff that's being put out in the media today is complete nonsense, man. It's really complete nonsense. But I think it does take us having conversations like this, being able to let people know that you can't always believe what you see in the media because there is an agenda, right? And you know, I'm sure we'll get into that. But let's
Yeah.
talk about sort of how you've been able to keep your foot on the gas pedal in terms of doing all of this work with these people.
Sure. So, you know, when I first started at Sony, again, mid 90s, there were these things related to an album. It's called a marketing plan. I know it sounds really cold, but it's how you got word about how this record exists and how you got it out to the masses and how you get it out worldwide, right? Like, what is the plan? What are we going to do? And I remember looking at these marketing plans and I saw all of them, all from, you know, baby bands up to some of the biggest artists in the world. And it all started with radio, and then it was MTV, and then it was, you know, media. It was like, what magazine covers can we be on? And then it was, you know, the tour, and then it was, you know, something random. And then the last thing was online and new media. That's what we were known as, new media. And we were always at the bottom, always, you know, without question. And my department was young and scrappy, and you know, we really felt like this was the future. And the rest of the company was like, "Oh, you little new media people! Oh, that's so sweet with your AOL and your modems and your dial-up. Oh, that's
Computers.
so cute!" Like, what are the chances any of this stuff is actually going to take off? Like, it just seemed so odd. And then, there were like little things like satellite radio, like, ooh, whatever. And, we're all going to have beepers for life and it's just going to be great. And so, that, as I don't have to tell you or anybody else, but that whole pyramid got inverted
Yeah.
in 10, 15, 20 years, where online became number one. Radio, I don't know if anybody remembers what radio is. Cough, cough. But it's so interesting what happened, and you can put the finger on why it happened on a couple things, right? I think broadband is pretty high up there. The fact that we went from modems and very expensive, pay per minute, dial-up, blah, 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 to this unlimited pipe that we all now have in our pocket. And that changed the game. Obviously faster chips and all, cheaper things. And the fact that technology is no longer a luxury. It's not for the rich. It's not for the middle class. It's a necessity. It's part of life. It's, as we all learned during the pandemic, you couldn't order food without a smartphone. That is a crazy, crazy thing. You couldn't look at the menu,
Yeah.
So it's not a luxury, and anyone who says otherwise is, not on this planet. So that really sort of changed, things for me, in terms of my job, and keeping, as you said, keeping a foothold on things. Like, now online is everything, regarding marketing, regarding distribution of music, promotion, obviously, just all of it. During the pandemic, people were throwing concerts online, as virtually. So it's really become sort of front and center. And luckily, I found myself in a position where, I'm sort of, again, one of these plumbers, and I can go into why I call myself that in a bit, but someone who just makes this stuff all go. And, for all its, getting easier stuff, there is still, why doesn't this work? Why doesn't that work? And that's where the plumbing comes in. A plumber is a guy you call when things aren't working, and, it's typically kind of expensive, which I try to be when I can. And, it's a way to just keep all this stuff going, maintain it, build it from scratch, just how do we keep developing? And yeah, that's where I found myself over the last couple of years.
I've had the great pleasure of being with Roger. So you know that I'm quite close with Roger, and
Yeah.
I spend a lot of time with him, whether it's just like hanging out, fly fishing, lawn bowling, or eating dinner or whatnot. And there's been many times, and I'm saying all this because now I kind of have a better understanding as to exactly what you do, at least for him, because I've been in the room with him when he's like, hey, you know what? Hold on one second. I need to finish this up. I need to get this off to David so we can get this posted. And I'm like, okay. So
Well, yeah, I can speak to exactly what that is. And I know I have not answered the question, which is what I actually do. So I want to address that because I have friends who still, dude, I've known you 10 years. I don't know what you do. And like, all right, well, let me get into it. So for Roger, he's a very good example, because he's sort of a perfect client in the sense that he has a very strong point of view. He knows exactly what he wants. There is no wishy-washy, like, David, what should we do today? He's like, no, this is what we're going to do. And what I do for him is, I built his website, I maintain it, sure, but now, as sort of the sexy, glamorous part of the online world is social media. And Roger is someone who, we were doing interesting things back on his website, in the early 90s, where he would send me, an essay and we would post it. He knew that this was an amazing way to have a one-to-one relationship with his fans, bring in new ones, sort of not have to wait 2 weeks for the new issue of Rolling Stone to hit the stands. This was like a one-to-one, boom, I can broadcast this out in this pure way without going through a gatekeeper. And that was web and blogging and live events and things, 15, 20 years ago. Obviously, the game has changed over the last decade with the rise of social media, right? So there, it's all of that, but on steroids, turbo boosted, real time, the New York Times publishing things a day late. Like, I once saw this comedy video, there's this reporter, he was in the New York Times office, and he said, so let me get this straight. Your newspaper reports on things that happened yesterday? What's the point of that? And the New York Times guy just looked at him blankly, like, okay, you got me. I mean, the point of that is we don't wait for anything these days, and the whole social structure these days is so real time that it's almost frightening in so many ways, right? Things happening, a submarine sinks an hour ago, we know about it an hour later. Like, that's wild, So anyway, I'm digressing from what I actually do again, but with Roger, he wants to put up content, on his social media, and that content ranges from, hey, I have a political point of view I want to, broadcast out. David, will you find me an image for it? Here's text. Will you couple it together with a song and post it on my Instagram, put it up on Facebook, put it up on Twitter? There'll be times when we have to promote a tour or a tour date or an event, and I'll cook up something with Sean Evans, who and we'll, make it look right, have a good text and promote it out. And, it's that, sort of promotional cycle. But with him, what's interesting, and I'm sure you know this all too well, he is not a salesperson in the way that a lot of people online, a lot of artists, a lot of everybody, let's face it. But he's not a one-man gift shop. He is very much a, this is how I feel in the world, and I want people to understand this point of view. And yeah, he wants people to know what's going on in his brain, which for me is such a powerful thing, because in a world where everyone is a one-person gift shop, he doesn't want to just do that. Not everything is about money. A lot of it really is about the world and trying to understand this world we live in that's getting crazier by the day. And he really doesn't believe there is an us and them. He believes we're all united, and we need to be united on one front and not have these factions. And yeah, I mean, if you go through his social media, you'll see exactly what I'm talking about. But, it's such a pleasure working with him. It's an honor. It's I still get little mini chills when he calls me on my phone. I'm like, when I was 16 years old, driving to high school, listening to The Wall, it just seemed very, 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 very far-fetched that dude would be texting me, WhatsApping me. I don't know. It still kind of blows my mind. And one last thing I'll say is that, there are some people who I meet in life who ask me about my job. I tell them, and some of them say one thing. They say, "Oh, well, they're just people, right?" And I get a little, sort of hold myself, shaking, get chills, and I'm like, "No, they're not just people. They create art. They create a point of view that for whatever reason, some of the people that I work with are creating things that are going to last until I don't even know how long. We're still going to be listening to the song Wish You Were Here in 300 years. I bet you anything. I don't know why, but we are. A couple weeks ago, I worked with Elton John. I went to his house, and at the party at his house, I asked people that I would bump into, strangers, people who worked with Elton. I say, hey, why? What is up with his music that resonates from person to person, generation to generation, that, we're just drawn into it? And we do, the hairs stand up on our arms when we hear your song, Daniel. There's a whole slew of of work that this man has produced with his writing partner Bernie, that for whatever reason tapped into the into the emotional zeitgeist of what it is to be a human. I don't know what that is, and that's why I like to ask people. But no one can really put a put a finger on it. And I think that's what's interesting. There's certain art that just makes you feel connected to humanity or whatever, and it can be in obviously books, it can be artwork, it can be theater, it can be TV. I mean, there's TV that blows my mind these days, but there's some art that just makes you realize, oh, I'm a human and we're all in this together and this is beautiful. I don't know. And there's work that our clients make, Roger being one of them, that I don't know. It's obviously, this is something that means a lot to me, the way that I gush on and on about. But yeah, these people are not just people to me, they were able to go deeper. And yeah, I don't know. It's something that means a lot to me, being able to work with artists, sitting in a conference room across the table from Sinead O'Connor, for instance. And I just remember in that position and just looking at her and like, my God, the work you've created, just wow. And then, for every Sinead, there's a bunch of other people I can cite. But, it's something that I don't take lightly. And in terms of what I do in new media, if you still want to call it that, in a lot of ways, I feel like a broadcaster, because they'll give me a piece of content and I'm literally broadcasting into the world. And, it's wild, how many people are seeing the stuff that I've, put out into the world with their help, of course, and other collaborators and stuff. But a lot of times it's me, kind of pressing the final button on this thing, this website, this video, this post, this whatever. And you kind of feel, at the moment, I'm mostly nervous that there's a colon missing or something. It's not all like, look at me, I'm Rupert Murdoch. It's not as simple as that. But there's a whole bunch of nerves every time you're sending a newsletter to 200,000 people or whatever it is. But my favorite story of this broadcasting thing is, I remember doing Mariah Carey's website like 1995, 96, and I was told, hey, we have some extra concert tickets to this New York show. Can you put something on her internet website talking about a giveaway or something? So I went in, I made a little program in Perl, if anyone remembers that old programming language, where you'd put in your email address, win 2 tickets to see Mariah Carey, and yeah, good luck. So I put it up. I didn't think anybody would see it. I mean, it's just, what are the chances? So I put it up, win 2 tickets, and there was a text file where I was collecting all the emails that came in, and I put it up. A minute later, I was like, I'm going to check the text file. There were like 100 people who entered this contest in 1 minute. And I was like, whoa, my whole world sort of changed, in the sense that people are looking at the buttons I'm pressing. There are people out there with their modems, like, checking this stuff out. And it was just wild. And I know I sound kind of like a caveman when I talk about this, but you have to understand, you were sort of like, in an office pressing buttons, and it's not like, working on MTV or radio where you actually saw the people and got feedback. Like, no, you didn't really. I mean, this was before Google Analytics and, things like that, where you could see real time what was going on. So you just didn't know. And the minute you did get feedback of like 100 people entering a contest in 1 minute, you were like, oh, wow, okay, we better take this seriously. But yeah, that was a real turning point for me. So yeah, I know, man, out there. But, yeah.
It's really fascinating, because similar to what you just described, I have a situation in which there are times when I get real-time feedback, and a lot of times it's not always the best feedback, right? So for instance, you may recall, I'm not sure if you were, I don't think you were there when we started in Lisbon on this the UK and Europe tour, but
Right.
At the beginning of the tour, Roger did something to his ankle, and while on stage, he was like, "Hey, everybody!" I think it was the first show of this European tour. He's like, "Yeah, if you see me kind of limping around a little bit. I hurt my ankle. And
Wow.
for me, I'm like, oh, because that kind of falls on my shoulders, right?
Sure.
And but then again, I get to see some of those articles when people come out and say, my goodness, Roger Waters looks, the best he's looked in several years. And he's
Absolutely.
at the, he has longevity in his career, and he's still touring, coming up on 80 years old, right?
Yeah.
So I can kind of balance that out. And the question that comes to mind, at least for me, and then possibly some of the other people who wonder what you do, is being that you are behind the scenes doing websites and social media content and things like that. I guess it begs the question, why is it, or how is it that I see you and Fran sometimes at certain shows versus, not being at any shows? Or I guess the question is what constitutes you actually being able to be there in person from time to time?
Yeah, that's a great question, and the one that my family asked me as well. So I'll explain that. So, people again ask me what I do, and I say, oh, I do stuff with rock stars and organizations and stuff. And they say, rock stars, like actual rock stars, like musicians? And I'm like, yeah, I do stuff with Roger Waters, who's in Pink Floyd, and this and that. And they're like, really? Like, yeah. It's like, do you get to meet them? Well, yeah, I do. Um, well, do you go to like concerts and stuff? Like, yeah, I do sometimes. I don't go for the entire tour. And then the question is, so what do you do when you're there? And that's a good question. Number one is, and I will say this with all my heart on my dying breath, I am a fan, dude. I will go and see a show the first time or the 17th time. I love it. There are some people who we know who go to shows and will stay, backstage or whatever and work or, do whatever they have to do. But for me, the show is the thing. I get such joy out of just literally feeling the music, the way Roger pumps it in very expensively, the way he does everything into a venue, and it just feels and sounds perfect, and the visuals and the production and the fan reaction. I love it. I get off on that 1,000%. So to answer your question about why you might see me at certain shows, certain cities, not the entire show, maybe not the beginning of the show. It's really based on my family schedule, and me asking permission from management, like, is it okay if I go to this or if I go to that? I don't feel like I need to be on an entire tour. I'm not really doing, work specifically tied to that show or tour. What I am doing, though, is showing my face, because the reality of my job is you don't really need to see me, like, pretty much ever, right? Like, if you and I have built trust as a client and me as the operator, like, we're good to go. You could probably go years without seeing me. But if you're on the road doing a show that I enjoy, and I want to say hi, and I want to meet Roger and kind of show my face. And also the reality is, I know for a fact that people on the road, it's sort of, you're very isolated, right? You almost like seeing a new face, somebody familiar, somebody who you're like, oh, hi, I know you, and it feels supportive. So for me, it goes both ways. I love the fact that I can support my client, and Rogers seems always excited to see me out there, as well as management. And also for me, it's a joy, it's a pleasure, it's a perk of the job, to be on the road. I love it. Could I do it for weeks on end? I haven't done it for weeks on end. I don't know if I could be away for that long. I have other clients, my family. Yeah, I mean, you could speak better to that point of just being on the road than I can, having you stayed on a tour for a long period of time. But the way Roger does things, and I don't have to tell you, it's kind of unlike anything I've ever seen, because he does everything at a very, very high level, because that's how he rolls. He's a very first class kind of guy. I appreciate that in my old age. I've done the bus van thing with other bands, rolling into, Phoenix on the Lollapalooza tour, and you're covered in dust. And yeah, I remember those days well, and I was a younger
Right.
man. But now this whole first class thing, you know, I've gotten kind of used to it, to be honest. It's all right. I can roll with it. And you know, for me, you know, I ended up in Prague with you and management, and Roger was so kind to me and put me up in the hotel with the band. And you know, it's way beyond any dream that I would have had at a job working at a bank or whatever. Not to dismiss anyone who works at a bank, but you know, this is the thing that I don't know. I always wanted to do. I didn't know existed. This whole, hey, let's fly around with the world with rock stars and stay at the best hotel in town. And it's like,
Right.
wait, what? And you get to
Right.
see a show and eat amazing food and have laughs and be part of something that gives people joy. When I'm at the hotel and I see fans lined out outside of the hotel, I'm one of those fans outside of the hotel. I just happen to be on the other side, but I've been there, man. I'm a fan. So it's such a surreal situation that I found myself in, and I don't take it for granted ever. Like, I'm just a very grateful, thankful person for where I ended up. And don't get me wrong, it is work. You know, it is stress at times. It is all the things that a job is. But the perk of being part of something that you love so much is just wild. And again, I'm not a music talent. I'm not the greatest computer person in the world. I just kind of, you know, put things together, but I do it in, you know, hopefully a passionate way. And I just feel very strongly about it. And I'm happy to drop everything and do work when I need to. And I think that's one of the reasons, you know, Roger and I get on so well, because he sends me something, I jump on it, you know. And I remember one time, you know, he calls me and I'll always answer the phone. I never let it go to voicemail. One time I was in the shower and he called me, and I you know, didn't answer the phone, obviously, but he sent me this message saying, David, I'm worried about you. Are you all right? Love, Roger. I was like, whoa, dude. Yeah, okay, man. I was just in the shower, because he's not used to me not being right there. And he's someone who, when he wants something, you know, he wants it then. He's not a, like, I'm going to sit around and wait kind of guy. And I respect that. You know, I respect that a lot. And I don't care if it's Sunday night or, you know, whatever. Like, I will do it. And that's how I roll. That's how he rolls. And, you know, there you go. That's 25 years of working together.
Beautiful.
So
Beautiful.
yeah.
Yeah, you know, I thought your answer to my question about, you know, why are you there sometimes in person, which it is always a pleasure to see you. And for me, there have been times I'm like, why isn't he here more? But I thought you were gonna say you come to the shows simply for the golden trough.
Well, you should explain to your viewers what that is, because it's pretty amazing.
Yeah, well, the golden trough, and you might be able to explain it better than I can, but it's what most people would know as an after party. And it's mostly a time period for Roger and the band to kind of decompress after having your adrenaline up and having all this energy on stage, you know, giving your all to thousands of people. It's not likely that you're just going to go home and, or, you know, go back to the hotel and go to sleep. Chances are you need to decompress, but also it's a moment for them to share what they just gifted to everyone. And sometimes, you know, if it's not like, if we're not in COVID protocol or whatever, sometimes, you know, there's friends of the band or friends of Roger, guests come, and we all get a chance to kind of break bread together and share the love beyond just the show. But it is a moment in which they call it a golden trough for a reason, because it's literally like whatever drinks you want, whatever food you want, it's all there. And that's actually way against what I believe in, right? Because I'm the guy that very rarely goes to the golden trough, mostly because I know if I'm there, I'm going to be tempted to drink, I'm going to be tempted to eat, and I'm going to be up way later than I need to be. But every once in a while, I'm there.
Yeah, exactly. And I'll expand on that for a second, because the golden trough, you know, is not something that happens every night. You know, I've heard like, oh, there's a trough tonight. Oh, there's a trough tomorrow. You know, that kind of thing. But you also use the term after party. And while it is a bit of an after party, some people might think of it in terms of a Def Leppard, Motley Crue, Guns N' Roses after party, like let's go crazy and throw ourselves against the wall and do shots. And this isn't that. This is like super civilized. It's almost like a wedding after the show in terms of like the
Yeah.
production, the food, the fact, I don't know how they do it, but they have hotels, like the best hotel in town, staying up after hours until 2 in the morning with a full spread, full bar, fully beautiful banquet room. I don't even, Fran and I have joked about what this must cost, but I have no idea what it was run to keep these people here, these hardworking hotel people, till 2 in the morning, just everything's flowing, this and that. And Roger will hang and, the band will hang until late, but then you will see people drift off, go to sleep. But I think the thing is with the Trough, like, I don't see how you could play a show to 20,000 people and just saunter back to your hotel room with, your guitar. That just seems impossible. So I think that's why it exists. And also, if you have people from out of town visiting, you want to spend time with them because you couldn't, during the show or before the show. So it's a good way to sort of mingle with, guests and things. But it's super civilized, and I always thought that was so interesting. This is not a crazy party, group. It's just very nice, and we're having laughs, and we're showing videos and telling jokes and talking about our family, and it's really just a wonderful thing. That must be insanely expensive, but I'm here for it, as they as they say.
Right. Yeah.
So yeah, I'm very
Awesome.
grateful to be invited. Yeah.
All right. We are at a point in the show where at least I can feel it. I'm not sure about you, but this is that point where, because I'm standing as we're doing this, and I
Okay.
can feel myself fidgeting a little bit because I need to move. And this is a
Sure.
perfect segue into the Pomodoro break that we do on the
Yes.
show. So anytime I have a guest on the show, I like to offer the guest to do something that they might do whenever they are at points when they've been sitting or standing or not moving for long periods of time, to kind of break up that monotony.
Sure.
What is something that you would do? And if you could also explain and demonstrate for us.
Sure. So this is a great question. Again, 95% of my job is in my little home office here in Austin, and yeah, as I approach 50 years old, sitting at a desk does definitely have its point at which you just feel yourself locking up, like I got to stretch, I got to move. So I'll often have calls with clients, friends, whoever, and what I'll do is I'll get up, I'll stretch, I'll actually walk around my house. There have been points at which, like, during these breaks, like, I've walked miles in my house, up and down the stairs. Sometimes I'll grab weights, 10 pounds, and I'll walk around with them. And then and I'll show you.
You must have a big house, David.
It's kind of large, but it's Texas, right? But I have these resistance bands, which you might be very familiar with. And what I'll do is, like, I'll literally stand up, and I'll use these bands, and I don't know what you can see, but I'll actually sort of move my body, and it feels so good just to stretch the muscles and just move around and get the blood flowing all over. And
Beautiful.
that's something I actually like to do, just to feel like I'm not gonna turn into the Hunchback of Notre Dame.
Right.
It's very important. And the more you're on Twitter, the more you're on Instagram and following influencers, you'll read about, like, oh, you need movement throughout your day, and you need to physically do things, otherwise you use it or lose it, right? As the saying goes. And that's something that I really took to heart a little before the pandemic started, and then during, very much so, because we were all trapped in our house. And then afterwards, I got a Peloton bike, and I did various things to really help me get moving as someone who's really desk bound, I guess. But it's been good for me, because what happens is, like, you'll get stuck on something, and you'll just stay at your desk trying to solve some problem, do some work, and you realize, oh wow, I haven't gotten up, I haven't showered, I haven't eaten, I haven't had any water, like basic stuff that even people in solitary confinement, do. You
Right.
haven't done. And that's easy. This whole working from home thing, you have to get into a flow of a healthy lifestyle. Otherwise, it'll just kind of bury you. So anyway, I'm not perfect at it or anything, but I do, like to do these weights during these breaks that I have on a call. I'll do the walking, I'll do resistance bands. Yeah, I think it's important. Yeah.
Beautifully put. And I think you are 100% right. And part of the reason why I like to do this portion of the show is simply for people. I mean, my hope is that when people begin to become familiar and become loyal to listening to the show, at some point throughout the show, you're going to hear what other people are doing. And it's just another example of like how you might be able to keep yourself better.
Sure.
1 second. Sorry. That was Roger. No,
Sure.
no, I'm joking. No,
Could be.
no, that was a package. You know what's funny about that is I actually, knowing how responsive you are to Roger and and obviously other clients as well, I
Sure.
kind of thought like, I wonder if he's gonna get messaged or called during this podcast.
Well,
Please.
yeah,
yeah.
they're gonna be kind
Anyway.
of stuck. I did turn my phone off and stuff for this, so I didn't want to be distracted. But normally, yeah, I probably would be.
Yeah. All right. Well, I feel like now people should have a little bit more of an understanding as to what David Paris does. And I know that you skirted around a little bit, and I'm sure you can explain even more about what you do. But there was something that was pretty pressing that you wanted to talk to me about when I last saw you. I
Yeah.
think this was in London, right? We were in London at the end of the show, I think it was, or
Yeah, that sounds right.
So let's talk about it, man. Let's open up the kimono a bit.
Yeah, so this is wild. I think this is sort of my coming out party about my health situation, and I'll give you the story. It's not very long, but around December of last year, 2022, I was having different symptoms. It was a case of, some fatigue. Um, I was thirsty like all the time. Just I could not drink enough water. I was for the first time in my life, in my adult life anyway, I was getting up in the middle of the night to urinate. I was, my eyesight was getting weird, and I thought that was just, old age. Oh my God, I finally at the time when I need glasses. I don't wear glasses ever. Um, I just had different weird symptoms, and then one night, I was like, "This is so weird. Like, what's going on with me?" So I started Googling, sort of symptom after symptom after symptom,
Uh-oh.
and it all added up, and it was on one list, and I had every symptom, and it was like, "Oh wow, I have type 2 diabetes." It was very, very clear, and I was was 48 years old, and up to then, I was kind of just living my life. Hey, there's a cupcake. The kids didn't eat it. I'll eat that. Boom. Um, Last year, I had an addiction problem. I'll admit, I was addicted to sweet tea. I know it sounds odd, but I discovered this brand of iced tea in my supermarket. It said slightly sweet tea, and to me, it was like I've always liked sweet tea my whole life, and then I've stopped for many years. But this was slightly sweet, so I was like, oh, that's healthy tea. All right, great, and it tasted so good. It was just like it was like a rainbow going down your mouth. It was just awesome, and I would just pound the stuff during dinner and lunch. It was my go-to beverage. And then one day, when the symptoms started kicking, I finally looked at the label, and holy shit, man, it had 34 grams of sugar or something in a serving. And I
A
never,
serving. A
yeah,
serving, by the way.
yeah, something crazy like that. And I never even looked at what the normal sweet tea was, because this was their brand of slightly sweet. So for me, it was like, this is, yeah, it's all good.
34.
But it wasn't good. So that I think pushed me over the edge where I was like, my body was like, yeah, you've got us going, man. Your blood's on fire. So I went into my doctor, and I hadn't been to the doctor in a very long time because of the pandemic or, whatever. I just never had the need, I guess, which was wrong of me, I admit. But she took my A1C, and it was high. And I'm not an obese guy. I'm pretty slim.
Yep.
But it does not matter. It does not matter who you are, how old you are, your ethnicity, whatever. It does run in my family. My father did have it towards the end of his life. So it is a bit in my genes, but at the same time, my eating habits were not great, even though my weight is, pretty normal-ish. And that, to me, over the last 4 or 5 months has really changed my lifestyle a lot. I watch what I eat a lot more than I ever did in my entire life. I used to eat too much. I mean, I would roll up to a Mexican restaurant, man, order the biggest thing they had, and I'd go at it because I got such joy out of food. The pleasures of just taste and all of it, the way that many of us do, I hope. And yeah, it was just something that I liked. And also food at some point becomes a hobby, right? It's like, oh, I want to try the latest restaurant, and oh, this recipe, and oh, you're watching Instagram food videos, and oh, it's like food. And where I live in Austin, there's plenty of great food, and it's like barbecue and tacos, and you can't get enough of it. It is part of the lifestyle. It's like, it's one of the reasons people move here. It's like why we're here, because of this like amazing food scene. And not to mention, we haven't even talked about drinking, right? So like craft beer, and I'm a bit of a beer snob, and I love a bottle of wine and this and that, and the amount of sugar and everything that comes in these things is not something that's avoidable. So I was just on this path of gluttony, or whatever you want to call it, where it wasn't sustainable. Maybe when I was 30, maybe when I was 40, but as I approach 50, the body's and no. You've hit the wall on what I can process. We're not going to do it anymore for you, and you're going to have these symptoms. So I got to tell you, the minute, Josh, I changed my diet, no more sugary drinks, no more desserts, no more a lot of things, everything changed. I lost a lot of weight. I got my energy back. All the things that you'll read about on Twitter about, like, eat more protein and this will happen. It's true. They're not lying to you. The body is a big engine. And if you feed it the wrong stuff, bad stuff will happen. You feed it good stuff, it's just going to keep revving. It's no different. And lately I've been thinking, life is a journey, but if the engine is no good, it's not a really great journey, especially towards the end. And, the thing is, like, your doctor can tell you all kinds of things. Your spouse can tell you all kinds of things. Your girlfriend or boyfriend can tell you, you're not really living your best life right now. You need to dial back or change or whatever. But those are the last people that you want any direction from. I think so much of this has to come from you. You have to want it. You have to not want to eat that cupcake. You have to do, and I say this as somebody who's living this life right now. Am I a stubborn person? I can be. I don't want to do what other people tell me what to do, but I was the one who wanted a Peloton. I was the one who, likes walking miles every day, tries to get that 10,000 steps. And, I'm the one who's not going to drink, a certain night because I want to sleep better. If I don't drink, my sleep quality is amazing. If I have wine or beer, at night, like, forget it. My heart races at night, and it's just, I do monitor my sleep through my watch and things, and yeah, it's a whole different experience. So anyway, I say all this because, I want to be alive as long as I can be. I'm not sure if I'm going to look as good as Roger Waters when I'm nearly 80. I don't think I can afford a trainer like you and this and that. but he is an inspiration to me, and so many people who, are looking like they're in their 40s or 50s when they are nearly 80. It can be done, but it takes this thing that a lot of people don't like, and it's called work, and it's called sacrifice, and it's called time, and it's called patience, and it's called sweating.
Yeah.
And you know, you can either get on the train of wanting to stay alive, or you can stay on the bus of I am going to go eat the biggest thing in the Mexican restaurant or whatever restaurant, because it's awesome and makes me feel good. And you know, there are those two paths. And you know, at some point there is a middle door saying, yeah, you can enjoy things, but you have to do it in moderation. You know, I think that's the key word here. When I first got my diabetes diagnosis, you know, I remember, you know, telling my wife about it, and I said, "Oh, you know, no more sugar for me, no more pasta, no more this." And she just looked at me and says, "No, don't do that. You'll do it wrong, because you'll drive yourself insane telling yourself no all the time,
That's
and
right.
then one day you'll just break and eat all the spaghetti because
Yeah.
the mind wants what the mind can't have, you know, that kind of thing." And I think she's exactly right. You know, I have found a middle ground where I'm not like, oh my God, I'm just eating protein all day and that's my whole life. No, I don't think you can sustainably live like that. There are people who will preach that, you know, just do the carnivore thing and, you know, life is amazing and this and that. But I don't think, one, that's sustainable. I'm not sure how healthy that is. I mean, you can speak to this better than me, but I think a life of moderation, a life of balance, you know, kind of like when we were growing up, you know, the food pyramid, and you got to have this, and you know, that was always preached. I think that has changed a lot. You know, the whole, hey, I'm going to wake up and eat the most sugary cereal I can find. I mean, that stuff has got to stop. You
Yeah.
know, whether it be in this country, worldwide, the reliance on just processed food that comes out of a box is crazy town. I don't even know. I'm going to say it out loud. I don't even know how soda is legal.
Exactly.
Honestly, how
Exactly.
is this sugary poison legal? I mean,
I mean,
as
well,
someone who doesn't drink soda, like I don't get it.
you could easily go down the rabbit hole of conspiracy theory and on a whole multitude of things. But I mean, if you really just think about it for a moment, it's a way to keep us into this poor healthcare cycle, right? It's what keeps us going to the hospital, to keep us being pumped with all of these medicines and things like that. And I mean, if you really think about it, I think that certain powers that be don't want you truthfully to get healthy, because
Yeah,
then they're kind of out of work.
right.
And and some of the things that I wanted to touch on that you brought up, I think is important, is when you change your framework and your perspective on, instead of thinking I cannot have this anymore, but I get to have all these other things, right? Then it becomes just as good. And I think a lot of times it takes approximately 3 to 4 weeks to kind of change a habit. You know, there's a lot of documentation and research out there to talk about habits and how we can change habits and grow new habits and things like that. But sometimes you just have to be patient with yourself and give it a little bit of time. And you start to notice that it might take 1 or 2 or several days to kind of scale back on some of these things that you know are bad for you.
Yeah,
And then you start to all of a sudden realize, wait, I haven't had refined sugars for 2 weeks, and now when I do want to go and enjoy something, you're like, whoa, this is crazy sweet, or this is crazy salty, or whatever. You start to realize that your palate changes, therefore your body's trying to help you get healthier.
yeah.
And David, if it's any consolation, by the way, I documented this. I think this was before I started doing podcasts with Gordon, but one of my first life force. This is this health coaching program where you do blood tests, and a group of doctors will highlight all of the high risk markers and things that you're doing well, things that you may not be doing well, or that could be done better. When it came back, they told me that I was borderline type 2 diabetic. Now,
Wow.
can
Wow.
you imagine what that did to
Wow.
me? Just like I'm sure it did for you. I was like, wait, what? Wait, what? Can we do that again? And when
Yeah.
I did the second test, I think it was 3 or 4 months later, my numbers did improve because I made some adjustments.
Yeah.
But they still told me, like, Josh, you're still right on that cusp to where you could still make some drastic improvements, and I've done that. And I finally realized that, like you pointed out, doesn't matter how fit you look, doesn't
Yeah.
matter how much you work out necessarily. It's yes, we have genetics, but those
Yep.
switches can be turned on or off.
Correct.
And those are epigenetic factors, which has to do with our environment, the things we eat, drink, how we sleep, how we exercise, and all of those things can be moderated. And if you're someone out there listening or watching this, and you're thinking, okay, these two people, like, shockingly, are type 2 diabetic or close to it, they only made those changes because they needed to, like, it's like, I think this should be a warning or a caution to everyone to go out and to get your blood work done, period.
Yeah.
And I'm a big fan of not just doing it once a year, but I'm a big fan of the Life Force program that talks about doing it 3 times a year or
Yep.
4 times a year.
Yep.
And so we could obviously talk offline, because I would love to know a little bit more about what they have you doing.
Sure.
But how are you doing now? Like, have you retested? Or, I mean, I know you said you felt better, you have more energy, things like that, but how are you doing now?
So I can answer that in a number of ways. The big answer is much better. I'm doing great. I went to the doctor actually earlier this week, and my A1C has dropped drastically compared to where it was, and I'm really happy with the progress. But I will say to you, I have not been a perfect diabetic eater, and I've kind of done that on purpose because I want to kind of see. I don't want to go extreme, right? If you go extreme, it's not really sustainable. It might not be healthy. But I also have a family. We like to go out to eat. We have family dinners. Like, I can't say to my wife, I want to have a ribeye every night, like, because it's protein, and like, I don't want to do that for me. I don't want to do that to her, and I want to, live a life where I can not think about food constantly. If I want a sandwich, I'll go out and eat a sandwich. If I decide, hey, I want to go low carb, low sugar, I'll figure that out. But yeah, that's sort of the rub for me. And I want to say that, in terms of my diagnosis, I read something recently that somebody said online, which was, if you're going to get anything, whether it be cancer, dementia, diabetes, you kind of want to pick diabetes because it is something that you can control through exercise, through diet, through mindset, through sleep, through, hydration, through all kinds of things, the way you can't control other terrible ailments, right? So for me, I know this might sound stupid, but diabetes was a wonderful wake-up call to me because, and I'm going to whisper this in your ear, this is how many of us should be eating.
Right.
Low carb, high protein, very low sugar. This is not some kind of quack situation. This is like what the body needs, so you don't get obese, so you don't have these health ailments, so you don't get cancers, so you don't, this is not a sort of, quackery of just like, oh, this weird guy on Twitter said I shouldn't have sugar. Like, no, you shouldn't. There are people who will laugh in the face of this. Elon Musk, I'm not picking on him specifically, but he did respond to somebody about a month ago on Twitter saying, you should not have sugary things for your breakfast. And he wrote back to that person on Twitter, with all his 100 million followers. He said, I have a donut every morning and I'm just fine. And the point of that is, Elon is not a, health expert, but at the same time, can you have a donut every morning and be fine? Absolutely. You can. Should you? That's debatable. And another thing I want to say is, everybody is different, right? Like,
Absolutely.
all our bodies are different. There is not one diet for everybody. What I do might not work for somebody else. What they do might not work for me. What you do, so to treat us like we should all drink, I don't know if you remember, some years ago, it was popularish, Soylent, this drink
Yes.
that would like fulfill all the nutrition, and all you would have to do is drink this powdery substance. I never even tried it, but that was like the Silicon Valley like tech bro solution to skipping lunch and being more efficient. I'm just going to drink Soylent. That never took off for whatever reason. There are people who probably know better than me, but there is not one silver bullet here that can fix or solve nutrition. The same way that, we all sleep differently, we all exercise differently, we all do everything different. But I think there are some things that are clearly not good for you. They're clearly bad for you, and it's about finding your way. I'll give you another example. Just yesterday, I subscribe to all these Facebook diabetes news groups and things, just to keep me, sort of on the straight and narrow, and to also get my mind like thinking about it. And somebody posted yesterday, hey, what kind of spices do you people put in your food? Because I hear that spices are high in carbohydrates and things. And I'm thinking, dude, you're worried about spices? You're doing it wrong. like, you'll eat this giant plate of spaghetti, but you'll think about how much paprika you put on it. Like, no, man. What I mean? It's like,
Of course. Of course.
I don't know.
Well, I will say this, just sorry to cut you off, but I think a couple important things to notate that I think you brought up, which is I think is very important. When you mentioned that of all the things that a person can get in terms of a bad diagnosis, specifically type 2 diabetes is probably the one that is the least concerning of all of them, because it's the one that is most correctable. And that's type 2 diabetes, right?
Yes.
Which is something that you develop over your lifestyle, right? And then another thing that you may come across, if you haven't already, is the use of a CGM, which is a continuous glucose monitor. And that is very helpful. And I would imagine that and I've used it throughout my life a couple times, just because I'm a curious person. I'm a biohacker. I like to test my body and to test how things are working. But maybe what has happened is maybe some people have tried to eat a certain food with certain spices on it, and maybe those spices spike their insulin for a period of time, because maybe they are sensitive to the nightshades, right? And that's a very small group of people. So I get what you're talking about, because really the point is like, if that's what you're worried about, then I mean, what about everything else, right? What about postprandial walks, or what about, getting a little bit more exercise, or not sitting so long, or whatever? That's just not a way to live if you're having to worry about spices,
But in life, as you know, sometimes people focus on the low-hanging fruit, right? Like, but there is evidence that things like cinnamon will definitely bring down your levels, and help you. I mean, who would have thought? And I think there's some things in nature that can just trigger you. Like, as a diabetic, you're not supposed to eat bananas. Like, and the whole fruit and diabetes thing is, sort of argument to me is fascinating, because again, it's fruit. It's not fentanyl. It's like, oh my God, he died eating a mango. Like, holy shit. Like, and I think for some people, they can be very sensitive to certain things. Like, for me, this is sort of the gluten thing all over again. Like, gluten is the real enemy, and, not, cocaine or whatever. It's such an interesting thing. But I speaking of drugs, I just want to say that, on a personal level, again, this is another sort of outing myself. I've never really done recreational drugs. I know I work in the music business and people have poked fun at me. I have a plan that when I turn 80, 81, whatever, I'm going to do all the drugs. I'm going to do the drugs that I hear about every day of my life. Heroin, cocaine, PCP, LSD, mushrooms, this and that.
Stay away from fentanyl, please.
Yeah. I've heard bad things, but my point in saying that is, like, it's this weird thing, right? You hear about drugs all the time, every day, in all kinds of capacities. I just don't have any interest, because again, I love life. doing some pill that you found on the floor of a music festival bathroom. Like, I don't subscribe to that personally, but I just realized like how many people in this world do, and it's crazy. And it's something that's sort of under the radar or covers, or you know, people who just do drugs a lot, and I'm starting to realize how widespread it is. I'm not here to judge. I'm just speaking about my personal thing where I'm not allowed to eat mango, but they can go and do, a pile of cocaine at a party or something. It just strikes me as funny. Um,
I think
yeah,
it's escapism, and
exactly. Yeah,
I think it's obviously there's you touched on something very very important, and that point is the recreational drug use, right? Because there is a huge amount of research to show that done in the right setting, some of these things can actually transform someone. For instance,
psychedelics. Yeah.
yeah, like when I've done psilocybin,
Yep.
and I've even done microdose of psilocybin. And like you, I was never one to be into recreational drug use, and it's like my plant medicine of choice is cannabis,
Yep.
and I would consider myself to be one that microdoses on cannabis. If I had the time before today's show, I would have been on cannabis, but I did some social media content and I had to work out. That's why I have a blue tongue. But there are some things that can help sort of rewire the brain to allow
Absolutely.
people to understand the things that they've been doing incorrectly, right? And so, like, anytime I've ever done a microdose of psilocybin, I almost I have to force myself to eat.
Yeah.
It's interesting, And so
Yeah.
then it's like, oh, wait a minute. So if I want to practice fasting, because I'm a big fan of intermittent fasting, sometimes I pair that with the microdosing of psilocybin.
Yeah, and I want to say one thing just to clarify. I think a lot of the things that you just spoke about, weed, etc., I think are much, somebody who's not an expert, as far as I know, much better than alcohol in
Oh,
so many ways. And the alcohol industry is so embedded in our life. It is insane. And for those who don't drink, I have much respect because you've been able to avoid this corporate, hold on society whereby you want to have a good time. Well, you got to grab a beer, you got to grab a, whatever. And it's crazy. It's expensive poison, as someone who likes to drink, like I will say that to you and anyone else. And the things that you spoke about, I've only heard good things about what they do for people in terms of, whether it be dealing with anxiety or just general life enjoyment, avoiding, sort of depressions and different situations that people find themselves in. And I'm not here to judge. Again, I'm not anti-drug, pro-drug, whatever. It's just my own journey. By saying I want to do it all on 80, I'm curious. I'm curious about this. I've been listening and reading about a Columbia professor who does,
oh yeah,
pure heroin.
oh
Dr. Carl
yeah.
Hart.
Professor Carl Hart. Yeah,
Yeah.
and that's a fascinating sort of story to me about him because I've seen him speak on podcasts. He's a very eloquent guy, but his drug of choice is things that people have this connotation about, but he says they enhance his life. So I don't think anyone has it quite figured out, and I think we're all curious by nature. And I'm not here to judge, but it's amazing about this life, and it can be very hard day to day and dealing with different things and stresses. And to your point, escapism, right? Why do we go to music festivals? Why do we go to church? Why do we do all kinds of things to escape, sort of that day-to-day thing that we find ourselves in? So anyway, I this journey fascinates me, and I'm still trying to figure things out in all kinds of ways. But yeah,
No,
the
it's
yeah.
very fascinating, and I know that the last time I saw you, is this right? Yeah, I think it was the last time I saw you.
Yep.
I remember. I don't know what your thoughts were on it, but I had this KETOHOL drink, which
Uh-huh.
is which is a healthier alternative to alcohol.
Yeah.
And you're gonna start to see lots and lots more talks around that.
Oh,
And
yep.
when I start talking about that, I'm coming from the person that I've never really liked drinking. I never drank until I was 21,
Yep.
mostly because I knew the implications in terms of sports performance, because that was a big part of my high school and early college years. Also, I was the person I'm a people watcher. I love to watch people. And I used to go to these tailgate parties because I'm from Oklahoma, right? So we would
Yep.
be out in the country, out in the sticks, and I would be fascinated at watching people, how they would act when they
Sure.
were drinking. And then,
Sure.
of course, I would be the responsible one that would be the designated driver. And I felt great knowing that I was able to kind of keep my friends out of trouble. And then when I took my first drink, I literally thought to myself, what is the hype about? Like, this
Mm,
stuff is gross. Like like beer was gross to me. I almost threw up.
sure.
And I mean, obviously looking back on it, I now know part of that was maybe the subconscious aversion to gluten, because I do have a gluten allergy. I have a gluten sensitivity.
Okay.
And so then I was like, okay, maybe I don't like beer, but let me try some like vodka and things like that. And even by itself, right? Like, to me, it was like, why am I drinking this? This is
Yeah.
gross. So
Yeah.
I was forced to then make a mixed drink.
Yep.
And then this thought came into my head, and I thought to myself, I know many people, many of my friends would easily be able to have a 12 pack of beer, sometimes 20 beers, and not
Yeah.
even bat an eye.
Yeah.
But they wouldn't be able to do that with water, or they wouldn't be able to do that with maybe
Right.
soda. And so
Sure.
I'm thinking, oh, this is because they know that they're gonna get a certain effect from that. And
Yeah.
so that's what they're actually chasing, is the effect from it.
Of
Because if
course.
we're really honest with ourselves, we can say, oh, no, but I actually do like the taste of wine. Okay, sure. You might like the taste of one glass of wine. You might like the taste of one beer or one mixed cocktail. But at the end of the day, what you're really chasing is that effect. And
Yeah.
so if you can get something that is healthier that gets you to that same effect,
Mhm.
then that's where we're, I think, going down the right path. And
Yeah.
I want to use my platform and my sort of influence to help people understand that, because there is a healthier way to do that, you know?
Yeah. Well, here's the thing, and here's the rub, and here's something that I'm gonna drop a little big picture science on you, economic
Please.
science. But our clients, who are in the music industry, the places where they play, the venues, the arenas, the stadiums, the small clubs, whatever you want, they would not exist if it were not for alcohol. Think about
Agreed.
that for a second.
Yeah.
That is a very big statement. That is something people have never said out loud. I'm going to say it here. But alcohol, booze, mixed drinks, beer, all down the line, there would be no live music business without it. When you think about it, right? Because they're just constantly selling drinks to thirsty patrons who want to have a good time. They're very overpriced drinks. But the reality is, a $14 beer at a Taylor Swift concert at a stadium is how a lot of these places float when they're empty, right? Not having Taylor Swift concerts, who I think she's great. I have nothing against her. Uh, she's a force of nature. But the thing is, the economic power of people, buying alcohol is what keeps a lot of things afloat.
Yeah.
Restaurants, museums, why they have bars in like really rando places, because it generates money. Nothing wrong with capitalism, but selling expensive poison to people, is that what we want to do and how we want to support business?
Mhm.
It's a very interesting thing. And I'm saying this as a drinker. But
Interesting.
I'm also a very big picture person. Um, Airports. Why do I see people drinking at 8 in the morning? Like a large beer. Like, and there have been stories written about this recently that I've seen. There was one in the Atlantic, I believe, recently. Like, what is it with people drinking in the morning at airports? And there's a variety of reasons, but you know, the airports are kind of thrilled, right? They're generating income, these businesses. So yeah, to your point about other things replacing alcohol, I think that is going to happen over time. The rise of, marijuana sales in different cities is been so fascinating in all kinds of ways. I visited New York City a couple times over the last, year, and I was shocked by the number of dispensaries that have taken over very expensive real estate, filling in old bistros that closed during the pandemic and banks or whatever. And there's a lot of them. I don't know if you agree, but
Yep.
it's a phenomenon, and I'm sure this is the case in other cities as well. And there's only one reason why there's so many, because of demand. So uh, it's wild. Amsterdam used to be the hub of this, right? And now Amsterdam, it could be a city not too far away from you
Yeah.
in terms of being able to get quality marijuana. And having looked into the, sort of the production of marijuana in California mainly, I've looked behind the curtain, and it is so regimented and so, government advised and regulated, and there is no wiggle room for like old school selling, pills and pot out of the back seat of a car. This is like on the up and up, taxed, regulated to the hilt. I mean, it's wild. And I give credit to, the government and cities and states, because I always thought that legislating a plant that grows out of the ground is very weird.
Yep.
like like how do you, it's like, you know what, you're not allowed to play with rocks because they could shatter a window or, hurt somebody. Like, oh, okay, I don't want to hurt anybody or shatter glass. Okay. It's kind of the same thing, right? The police could come around saying, stop playing with those rocks. It's like, hey, that plant, don't light it on fire and put it in your mouth. Like, don't do that. Like, at what point, does it
Well,
make sense or not? I don't know.
think about this: the hemp plant, right?
Yeah.
Just hemp.
Yeah.
Hemp is an amazing plant.
Yeah. It's very
It's great for textile.
Yep.
It's a great food,
Yep.
right? So it can be used as food. You can get all kinds of stuff from it. So many nutrients, very nutrient dense. And it can be used to make rope. It can be used to make clothing. It can be used to make all sorts of things. But the government decided to do everything in its power to get rid of it because it encroached upon the production of cotton
Sure.
through
Sure.
the slave trade, right?
Yep.
So, it's like, come on, people. Like, if that's not enough to make you think,
Yeah.
it should make you pause for a moment, right? And I'm a huge fan of hemp. Once I started to learn more about it, obviously I'm a huge fan of cannabis as well. I think all of this is it's like giving us our power back finally. When I start to see these dispensaries open and things like that, obviously I see that there's a business component to it, but I start to think, thankfully, we're getting our power back as a people. Slowly
Mhm.
but surely, we're getting there.
Yeah.
And I didn't even expect to be talking about all this with you on the show, so I'm glad you brought that up.
Well, yeah, I'm a curious, well-rounded, or I try to be, person. But again, to your point about, sort of things changing and people changing things, I think this is no surprise to anybody, and I'm not a conspiracy theorist in the least, but I think we have been living in a very corrupt, heavily lobbied environment in this country and worldwide for a very long time, where certain things, whether it be hemp or how prevalent alcohol is everywhere, people just pushing this agenda, and it just unfortunately has to do with this one thing that we all worship, for better or worse, which is called money, right? At the end of the day. and the money worship part of life is very difficult. I remember one of the last conversations I had with my father before he passed away was we were at dinner and talking about money or something, and I said to him, like, money is not all that great, but it gives you options. and and he smiled and said, "Yep, yep."
That's right.
And I believe that. I'm sure both of us have been at points in our life where we didn't have much money, and we didn't have many options because
Right.
we didn't have the money, or the stress of not having money just weighed on us constantly, and life sucked because you're stressed out that you don't have it. And then when you do have it, you get so scared that you're going to lose it. It's this catch-22 of, oh man, I still remember, I think one of the happiest times in my life was this living paycheck to paycheck in New York, not having much savings, and just like, yeah, life is great. I can just, get what I want, and that's it. There was no way to pay my bills, and there was no savings, and then worrying about the savings, and or more importantly growing the savings, and so anyway.
More money, more problems, as they say, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Um,
So
well, David,
well,
this has been, I mean, it's such a fascinating conversation. If nothing else, for me. And my hope is that the audience, the listeners and the viewers, my hope is that they've also learned a lot, gained a lot of insight, and maybe even brought up some more questions that they can have amongst themselves, or even they may appear on the comment section on this video. But
yeah. And I
as we,
want to say one
Mhm,
last thing. I'm sorry, but
no worries.
my focus of my job and what I've been doing for a long time, I didn't even really get into. So that might be a part two. But I wanted to talk at some point about the effect of the internet on the music business specifically, just because that's how I spend so much of my days and what people really like talking to me or what I'm good at. So I never even broached that. But maybe, yeah, I'd love to do a part two about
Let's
how
let's
the
do a
internet
part
has transformed.
two.
Yeah.
Yeah, we
Sure.
could do a part two, part three. I'd love to have you back. You're easy to talk to, and I imagine my guests will think the same thing. Um, and as we start to wrap this up, there's a couple of questions I'd like to ask.
Yeah.
And the first question, I'm very curious about your response to this. What are your top two pet peeves right now?
Oh gosh. Number one is kind of easy. Um, and it has to do with social media, and it has to do maybe life in general. But people who take themselves too seriously, it's a bit of a pet peeve to me. People who can't laugh at themselves and laugh at others, and I think I think humor in this life is so important. For example, to refer to him again, Roger Waters, people might think of him as super serious and, not a big joker. But you and I both know humor is a big part of his life.
For sure.
And it's one of the first things he ever told me when I encountered him back in the 90s. He told me, like, he wished there were more laughs in the wall. And I, I remember thinking, dude, that's the weirdest thing I've ever heard in my life. But okay, you wrote
Yeah.
it, but that made no sense. So anyway, um, humor is very important to me. So that's number one. People who just, I don't know, take themselves too seriously. Number two is a pet peeve. Oh gosh, I I don't know. I'm in a happy Friday mood today, so I don't want to speak about anything specifically. But I think one thing that I don't like that's a peeve is people who put themselves in buckets and can't get themselves out. Like, I'm X, Y, and Z, and that's all I'm going to be. And I don't want to deal or interface with anyone who's not X, Y, and Z. Um, it's a dangerous thing. I'm a certain religion, I'm a certain ethnicity, I'm a certain socioeconomic class, and that's all I'm ever going to be. And on the other side is the same people who, like, I'm only going to do fancy stuff, and I'm only going to do what influencers tell me, and I'm only going to, like, I don't like that, and I think it's what it hurts the bigger picture of society. the Ukrainians versus the Russians and the Americans versus the Russians. And Josh, you and I, have the luxury of being able to travel. And travel is such a luxury in terms of money and time. And to see how other people live, I have never been to Prague, and I kind of had this notion of Prague that it was like, I don't know, kind of dark and like Dracula or something. And dude, I went there and the people were so nice and warm, and it was a wonderful climate and beautiful. But as I like to joke, like Prague needs a better publicist or something, because the word needs to get out that this place is like a picture postcard. And by saying that, I mean, we have these preconceived notions of things and people. Like, you've been to far-flung places, and when I was in high school, I went to Russia, as a country trip, I went to Paris and London and Moscow. And I was a little worried going to Moscow, like, what's it going to be like? And is the food weird? And the people just all soldiers and this and that. And they couldn't have been nicer. And they just want what we want. They want to be happy and they want nice lives. And, they're just living their life, And I'm sure it's that way in a lot of places that we think are crazy, like North Korea and this and that. Like, but the problem is a lot of people, Americans or otherwise, have never even been. Right. To these other places. And we think we know everything from the screen. Like, oh, you can watch a YouTube video. I know everything about Guatemala. Like, no, you don't. Sometimes you have to be boots on the ground. Anyway, long response to your pet peeve, but I think people have to expand their minds and open their minds and, not judge, and people themselves need to not think I'm only this. But the reality is you're not. You're part of the bigger scope of human nature and civilization and all of it. And I think that would help a lot of people, and help the society and help reduce war and tension. And so anyway, that's my hippie statement for the day.
There was two wonderful responses to that. And I can relate quite a bit to both of those responses. So thank you for sharing that. Sure. My last question, definitely by far, is one of my favorites. What is something you are most grateful for?
Oh gosh. As a grateful person in general, I can answer that in a very multi-layered, nuanced way. But, as of today, I'm very grateful for my beautiful family. That's number one. On a whole, I mean, health, which I've spoken about, is everything. And I want us all, and again, you can speak better to this than anybody, but we need to treat ourselves better, and part of that is about longevity and things. And I think one of the things I did say to you in Europe when we were last together was, I think so many deaths are preventable, like that person didn't have to die. And, in terms of gratefulness, like what better answer is, I'm grateful to be alive rather than the opposite, and I think that's my ultimate answer to you. I'm grateful to be alive. And it takes work. Life is hard. Life is sacrifice. And that gratefulness to be here and to see how this journey flows and to keep that engine running. And I want to say I'm here to stay. I just gotta keep making the right moves. Yeah,
you got this. And to be quite frank, the practice of gratitude is actually something that can increase your health and increase your longevity. So I think that is very, very important that you brought that up. Again, this has been wonderful conversation. I knew it would be good, but I wasn't quite sure what path we were going to go down because we have so many layers. But I promise, like I'm saying it here now, I want to have you back. We're going to have you back, and come back as many times as you want, because this has been fascinating. I would love for you to explain to people the best ways to keep in touch with what you're up to, best place to kind of follow your work and so on and so forth.
Well, thanks. I'm on, social media like the rest of us. I'm D Peris on most places, DPERIS as in Sam, David Peris, my name. You can reach me at david@rogerwaters.com. if you're, one of those people who still uses email, which I do. And yeah, otherwise I'm around, and I love answering questions, and I'm again very curious. So yeah, feel free to reach out about anything.
He's a great follow, by the way, and I actually mentioned that to you before we started recording. If you follow David, I think you mostly post on Facebook, I think, right? But
mixture of Facebook and Instagram. I'm not a big poster, to be honest. I get sick of myself. That's my thing. Like, I just don't want to hear about myself. But there's things that just make me laugh, or I want to tell people, or more importantly, I want to remember. Like, something happened, I want to put it up. I can look back and reflect on it. That's why I think most of my things are posts rather than stories that go poof, because I get joy out of just looking back at something that happened a couple years ago and saying, "Oh, that's hilarious."
No,
whatever.
it's good. It's good stuff, and I'm not just saying that because you're here, but like it is interesting, and I'm always surprised that whenever you do post, because like you said, you're a very sporadic poster. I mean, I guess compared to someone like an influencer,
Sure.
but every time you post, it's like something comes over me where I'm like, oh wait, I gotta read this, because wait, what is he talking about? So anyway, keep up the good work. Job well done. And if anyone has any questions for me or for David, feel free to shout us out in the comment section. Give him a follow, see what he's up to, and yeah. Awesome. Any last words, Dave?
No, man, this has been a delight, and thank you, Josh. And your work is unbelievable with other humans. I'm very impressed. And at some point, I want to talk to you about your methods and how you go about work. But what you're doing is arguably one of the most important jobs out there, other than teacher. And I guess you are a teacher in so many ways, but keeping people fit and happy and productive is, I don't know if anything more noble. So good work. Yeah.
Well, thank you for that. And I'll just finish quickly with something that we can follow up on our next chat. But I am now even more, I'm realizing even more just how important my work is after what we've all seen in the media this past week with a former client of mine. I mean, she's still a client of mine, but there's some scary stuff happening, and I just think that anybody at a level in which you have the ability to work with someone, just reach out, take care of yourself. We got to be much better to ourselves so that we don't, and it doesn't matter what level you are, whether you don't have money, you do have lots of money, you're a celebrity or not, we all need to work together to put our health at the top of our focus, period. So I'll leave you with that. This is Josh signing out with Simply Walk the Talk, and David Peris. Peace.
Simply walk the talk.
Walk the talk, talking facts. Move like me, but I move a little fast. Make my move, here to last. Fasten these seatbelts, I'm coming past. Take care of me, longevity. Hack my biology, better believe. Walking the talk, soul, mind, and body connected. Better come give us a listen.